Welcome to Dead Vision. Tonight we've got 3 stories from people who made some terrible life choices. First, Frank Holloway, night shift guy, thought the scariest thing he'd face was the gas prices. The universe disagreed. Then, Martin Keeler moved into an old apartment because the rent was cheap. There's always a reason it's cheap. In his case, a burned face and zero respect for boundaries. And finally, Ben Morrison, a reporter who went chasing a ghost train because apparently common sense isn't universal. He found the train found him, never ends well. So sit back, lights down, volume up, and if something strange happens in your house tonight, don't panic. It's probably unrelated, probably. Frank Holloway was 42. His hair had thinned. His wife had left 3 years ago. His son lived in another state. Frank's life was the night shift. He started at 11. He finished at 7, 8 hours in between, all quiet. Tonight was the same. The place was a small town in Pennsylvania. No one remembered its name. Anyway, Frank worked at a gas station on the edge of town right off the main road. At night, 2 or 3 cars passed, sometimes none. 2 pumps stood out front, red and white, old models with mechanical counters. In the back, a small room, a table, a chair, a space heater, a calendar on the wall, October 1974, a radio that picked up only one station. It played music. Sometimes it read out numbers. Frank didn't know what the numbers meant. He didn't care. At 11, he unlocked the door. Inside was cold. He turned on the heater, set his thermos on the table. The coffee was cold, but he'd drink it anyway. He turned on the radio, a faint, high-pitched tone, then music, instrumental, nothing he recognized. Frank sat down on the chair. He kept his jacket on. The cold had settled into his bones. He looked outside. The road was empty. Darkness covered everything. No streetlights, only the station bulbs glowing yellow. Frank lit a cigarette and sat. The first car showed up 5 minutes before midnight. An old Chevrolet, blue, rusted. Frank stepped outside. The wind was blowing cold. The driver was a middle-aged man wearing a hat. Frank couldn't fully see his face. "Fill it," the man said. Frank started the pump. Gas ran into the tank. The counter spun. The man smoked, window open, eyes never meeting Frank's. "Cold night," Frank said. The man didn't answer. Frank shrugged. He was used to silence. The tank filled. Frank took the money. The Chevrolet drove off, swallowed by the dark. Frank went back inside, sat near the heater. His hands were trembling. At 2 a.m., the second car arrived. A Ford this time. Red, new model. Inside, a young couple, laughing, music loud. Frank stepped outside, filled the gas. The couple held each other. Frank ignored them. He took the money. The car drove off. Frank went back inside. He finished his coffee. The thermos was empty. The radio began reading numbers. 6, 12, 23, 41. Frank looked at the radio. He almost turned the volume down, but didn't. There was nothing else to listen to anyway. At 3 a.m., the door opened. Frank flinched. He hadn't seen anyone walk in. A woman stood there, long hair, white dress. She looked young. Frank stood up. "Good evening." She didn't answer, just stared. "Can I help you?" he asked. The woman smiled. Her eyes stayed cold. "May I use the phone?" she said. Frank nodded. "Sure, on the wall." She walked to the phone, dialed a number, waited. Frank sat at the table, tried not to look at her, but he did. She didn't speak, just listened. Then she hung up. "Thank you," she said. "You're welcome," Frank replied. She walked out, vanished into the dark. Frank went to the window, looked for her. Nothing, no car either. He frowned. How had she gotten here? On foot? The town was 3 kilometers away. Walking would take hours. Frank shook his head. He didn't care. The night shift was full of strange things. At 4 a.m., the radio cut out. Frank checked the knob. It was on, but silent. He tapped the radio. Nothing. Then a sound crept in, a high-pitched hum followed by a woman's voice, whispering. Frank ran back to the station, locked the door, turned off the lights. He sat in the dark and waited. At 7 a.m., the sun came up. Frank opened the door, stepped outside. The road looked normal, no cars anywhere. The sun climbed over the horizon, cold but bright. Frank took a deep breath. The night was over. He went home, lay on his bed, but he couldn't sleep. At 11 that evening, he'd go back to work because the night shift never really ended. Frank Holloway works at a gas station on the night shift, alone in the dark. He sees strange things. He hears strange things. But every morning, the sun rises, and Frank survives. Because some people learn to live with fear. Some people learn to exist in the dark. And some people on the night shift wait for death. The next night, Frank went to work again. He unlocked the door, walked inside. The radio sat on the table, broken apart, but still working. And Linda's voice came through again. "Welcome back, Frank." Frank sat down on the chair, lit a cigarette. The night was long. Night shift. Some people do it for the money, some because they have to, and some because they don't have anything else left. Which one is Frank Holloway? Honestly, he probably doesn't know either. But here's the one thing we do know. Tomorrow night, he'll be right back here. And the night, like it has nothing better to do, will be waiting for him. Martin Keeler was 47. He lived on the third floor, apartment 3B, alone. The building was old, Cleveland, built in the 1920s, thick walls, high ceilings, peeling paint everywhere. Martin didn't like the place, but he could afford the rent. That was enough. 12 apartments, 4 floors, 3 units on each floor. Martin didn't know his neighbors, didn't want to. Sometimes he only said hello in the hallway. Tonight was early December, cold. The radiator wasn't working. The manager said he'd fix it tomorrow. Martin didn't care. He had a blanket. At 11 p.m., Martin turned off the TV, got ready for bed, went to the bathroom, brushed his teeth, looked at himself in the mirror. He looked tired. He always looked tired. He put on his old pajamas, lay down, turned off the lights. Around midnight, he heard a sound, footsteps coming from the hallway. Martin opened his eyes, stared at the ceiling in the dark. The footsteps were slow, heavy, like someone dragging their feet. He listened. The steps came closer, stopped right outside his door. He waited. Nothing happened. Then the steps moved away, toward the stairs, and faded out. Martin assumed a neighbor came home late, probably drunk. He closed his eyes, tried to sleep. At 1 a.m., he woke up again, this time a different sound, a scraping noise. It sounded like someone scratching the door. Martin sat up, listened carefully. The sound kept going, slow, steady. He got out of bed, walked toward the door. The sound stopped. Martin held his breath, waited. Nothing. He looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty, a dim bulb flickering. No one there. Martin shook his head. Maybe mice. Old buildings do that. He went back to bed, lay down, but he couldn't sleep. The next night, it happened again. Footsteps. Midnight. Same as always. Martin didn't even wake for that anymore. He was used to it. But at 2 a.m., a different sound. The doorknob turned. Martin opened his eyes. The door was locked, but the knob turned again, slowly. Someone was trying to come in. Martin jumped out of bed, ran to the door. "Who is it?" he shouted. The knob stopped. Silence. He looked through the peephole. Someone stood outside, back turned. Tall man, dark coat. "What do you want?" Martin asked. No answer. He just stood there. Then he slowly turned. Martin tried to see his face, but it was too dark. The man leaned in right up to the peephole. Martin stepped back. The man placed his hand over the peephole. Martin saw his fingers, pale, long, dirt under the nails. Martin backed away from the door, his heart pounding hard. Then footsteps, fading, the man leaving. Martin sank to the floor, breathing fast. In the morning, he went to the manager, Harold, 60s, heavy set, always tired. Someone tried my door last night, Martin said. Harold raised an eyebrow. You sure? Yes. He turned the doorknob. Harold shrugged. Probably hit the wrong door, drunk. 3 times. 3 nights in a row? Harold lit a cigarette. If you want to call the cops, call them. What do you think? Me? Harold laughed. I've worked in this building 20 years. I see strange things. Doesn't bother me. What kind of strange things? Harold looked at him. You really want to know? Martin didn't answer. Harold kept talking. 1968, a man on the 4th floor died. Heart attack. Found in the hallway, 6 in the morning. What does that have to do with anything? Everything connects, Harold said. This building's old. A lot of people lived here. A lot of people died. Martin shook his head. I just want to sleep. Then add a lock to your door. I already have one. Add another. Martin got a second lock installed. But that night, the sounds came back. Footsteps, scraping, the doorknob. Martin listened from his bed, not scared anymore, just angry. He walked to the door, opened it. No one. Only the dim hallway and silence. Show yourself, Martin shouted. He stepped into the corridor, looked around. Near the stairs, a shadow. It moved, went down. Martin followed. 2nd floor, the shadow again. Faster now. Martin ran. 1st floor. The shadow moved toward the entrance door. Then it stopped. Martin stopped too. The shadow slowly turned. Now Martin could see it clearly. A tall man, dark coat, white hair, and his face burned. Martin stepped back. The man started walking toward him. Martin ran, hit the stairs, up to the 3rd floor. He rushed into his apartment, slammed the door, locked it. Breath trembling, heart racing. A sound came from the other side of the door, a soft rattle, then silence. Martin sat on the floor, hands shaking. The next morning, he went to Harold. Who died in this building? Martin asked. Harold frowned. Plenty. I mean, someone specific, someone without a face. Harold froze, crushed out his cigarette. How do you know that? I saw him last night. Harold took a slow breath. 1952, 1st floor. A man named Charles White. Fire in his apartment. Face burned. Died in the hospital. Is he the one walking around? I don't know, but some tenants have seen him. What am I supposed to do? Harold shrugged. Nothing. He just wanders. Doesn't hurt anyone. You sure? No. That night, Martin didn't sleep. Left the lights on, radio on, sat on his bed, and waited. Around midnight. The sounds began. Footsteps, moving down the hallway. Martin stared at the door. The doorknob turned. He held his breath. The door didn't open. 2 locks held it shut. But a shadow slipped under the door, slow, like thick, dark liquid. Martin jumped up. The shadow spread across the room and took shape. The man appeared. Tall, long coat, no face. Martin backed up, hit the wall. The man stepped closer. What do you want? Martin whispered. No answer. A hand rose, reaching toward Martin's face. Martin turned his head, eyes shut tight. The fingers touched him, cold, freezing. He tried to scream, but nothing came out. Then the man vanished, just gone. The room settled, quiet, normal. Martin fell to the floor, struggling to breathe. In the morning, he went to Harold. I'm moving out, Martin said. Harold nodded. Good idea. What if someone else moves in? They will. Someone always does. Are you going to tell them? Harold lit a cigarette. Tell them what? Charles. Harold laughed. No one believes it. You didn't either. Martin stayed silent. Harold went on. Everybody sees something in this building. Nobody talks. Rent's cheap. Is that true? It's all true, if you believe it. Martin moved out that day, packed his things, rented a truck, left by afternoon. Harold stood at the door, watching. See you, he said. Martin didn't answer. Got in the car, drove away, never looked back. Martin Keeler? Yeah, that unlucky guy. He lived in a rundown building, saw shadows in the hallway, met a burned-faced ghost, and then decided to start fresh. New building, cleaner walls, safer corridors. Sure, if you lie to yourself hard enough, anything sounds safe. But some things don't care about fresh paint. They don't stay behind. They follow the forwarding address, and whatever's after Martin takes its job pretty seriously. In new apartment, midnight, footsteps in the hallway. Martin opened his eyes, buried his face in the pillow, whispered, "Seriously? I moved here yesterday." The doorknob turned. Martin pulled the blanket over his head, muttered to himself, "Great, new place, same problem." Because some people move out, some things don't let go. Ben Morrison was 43. He lived in a small town in Montana, Silver Pines. He worked at the town newspaper, the only one. Came out once a week. He was married, Linda, 2 kids. Ben lived a quiet, ordinary life. But this week, he wanted something different. A story about the Silver Pines train crossing and the ghost train. The crossing sat on the east side of town, an old rail line, unused since the 1950s, rusty rails, rotten ties, weeds everywhere. The townspeople avoided it, and especially at night, because on some nights, a train passed through. Only problem, there was no train. Just the whistle, the wheels, the rumble, and sometimes lights. Ben talked to the locals. First was an old man named Vernon, sitting in the cafe, smoking. "What do you know about the ghost train?" Ben asked. Vernon chuckled. "Plenty. I know all of it." "Tell me." Vernon put out his cigarette. 1953. There was an accident. Freight train derailed, rolled over, engineer died, 3 workers too. And then, line shut down, company folded, but people kept hearing it. Late at night, train sounds, like that night never ended. "You heard it?" Vernon nodded. "Once, 1961, midnight walk home, past the crossing, heard the whistle, turned around, nothing." "Anything else?" "Lights in the distance, like headlights, but no train." Ben took notes. "Anyone else see it?" "Plenty. They don't talk. No one wants to sound crazy." That night, Ben went to the crossing, alone, camera in hand, 11 p.m., clear sky, moonlight. He reached the tracks, rusted, covered in moss. Silence, only wind. Ben stood beside the rails and waited. Half an hour passed, nothing. Ben took pictures, the tracks, the crossing, the old signal. Then he heard something. Distant, faint, a whistle. Ben froze, listened. The sound came again, closer this time, long, thin, an old train whistle. He looked down the tracks, darkness, then lights, 2 headlights, yellow, moving toward him. Ben stepped back. Heart racing. The lights came closer. The noise grew louder. Train sounds, wheels, metal grinding. But no train, just the lights, just the sound. Ben raised his camera, took a photo. Flash. The crossing lit up, and then silence, darkness. The lights were gone. The sound stopped. Ben gasped for air. Shaking, he checked his camera, looked at the photo. Nothing. Just empty tracks. The next day, Ben went to the town archives, searched through old newspaper records. He found an article about the 1953 crash. Train crash claims 4 lives. A freight train derailed on the Silver Pines line. The engine overturned. Engineer Henry Caldwell and 3 workers died, cause unknown. Ben kept searching, found a witness statement. The train stopped suddenly. The engineer hit the brakes, but too late. It felt like something was on the tracks, but nobody saw anything. Ben closed the file. Something on the tracks. But what? That night, Ben went back to the crossing. But this time he started in daylight to investigate. He studied the rails, checked the ground, looked around. Then he found an old plaque, broken, lying in the dirt. Faded writing, Henry Caldwell, 1953. A memorial, right where the crash happened. Ben lifted the plaque, looked underneath. A small metal box, rusty. Ben picked it up, opened it. Inside, an old letter, handwritten. "Dear Henry, this line isn't safe. Please be careful. There have been too many accidents. It feels like there's a curse. Margaret. Ben read the letter. Margaret was probably Henry's wife. Ben shook his head. It sounded ridiculous, but still, midnight. Ben sat beside the tracks, waiting. Camera ready, almost 12. Then, the whistle. Ben stood up fast. Lights appeared, moving closer. But this time, he saw something else. Behind the lights, a shadow, large, dark, shaped like a train, but blurry, unreal. Ben lifted the camera, took a shot. Flash lit the crossing. The train stopped, right in front of him. Ben froze. The door opened. A figure stepped out. A man, engineer's uniform, pale face, empty eyes. "Are you Henry Caldwell?" Ben whispered. The man nodded, slowly. "What do you want?" "I want to leave, but I can't." "Why?" "Because that night never ended. I'm still here, still derailing, still dying." Ben stepped back. "How do I stop it?" "You can't. This is my hell." He turned, stepped back into the train. The door closed. The train moved. It went away. The lights disappeared. Ben was left alone. In the morning, Ben wrote his article, but he didn't publish it. His editor didn't believe him. There was no proof. The photos were empty, only the tracks. Ben deleted the article, but he couldn't forget, because that night something had changed. He had seen Henry, and he had felt his pain. A week later, someone else went to the train crossing, a young couple. They were curious. They waited there at midnight. They saw the train, the lights, the sounds. But then the train came toward them. It didn't stop. The couple ran, tried to escape, but the train followed them. In the morning, their car was found on the side of the road. But the couple was gone. They had disappeared. Ben heard the news. He went to the crossing, stood on the tracks. "Henry," he called. "Why?" No answer. But from a distance, he heard a whistle. Faint, far, warning. Ben turned and left. Silver Pines train crossing, that forgotten corner of Montana back in 1953. A train derailed. The engineer and 3 workers died. And ever since, everyone pretends the line is closed. But some nights, the train still shows up. No destination, no schedule, no logic. It just appears, wanders around, and when it gets bored, it picks someone up. Do the townspeople know? Of course they do, but nobody talks. Around here, people fear 2 things: ghost trains and gossip. The rails are rotting. The crossing is empty. But Henry is still there, the only engineer who never retired. If you're on that road at midnight and hear a whistle, take a breath. Don't panic yet. Maybe it's the wind, maybe a truck, or maybe Henry thinking, "Great, a new passenger." Don't worry. His train doesn't need a ticket, no paperwork, no reservation, one way only. And return trips? Henry doesn't do those. Good night, ladies and gentlemen. Sleep if you can.